So my question is, so if Jesus and his disciples, originally as a Jewish sect, what do you believe was their main objective as compared to today, what Paul took the movement and turned it into? Like, what do you believe? Do you believe Jesus and the disciples in the Jerusalem church were just misunderstood, or did they have it wrong from the beginning? And I'm just wondering what your opinion is, like why or why not what their true intentions were. So from your understanding, was Jesus claiming to be God? Was he trying to be the Messiah, and did the disciples believe it to be that?
So, as it turns out, I don't believe that Jesus claimed to be the Messiah, but rather that was a claim made for him later. And that's why you'll find something very intriguing in the Gospels, and more specifically in the book of Mark, the earliest of the four Gospels, and the Gospel that I believe that at least 2 out of 3 other Gospels relied on. Matthew and Luke certainly completely relied on Mark and other sources. We find that the notion that Jesus was the Messiah was supposed to be a huge secret. I mean, the book of Mark, the smallest of the 4 Gospels, the first half of it, nobody knows who Jesus is, and no one's supposed to know. And if anyone guesses who he is, even a spirit, they're told to remain silent and to be quiet. Why would that enter into the calculus? Why would they insert that? And this is not restricted just to Mark. You'd find it in Matthew chapter 16, verse 20. Literally, we are told that it was a secret. No one's supposed to know he's the Messiah. How did that creep in? What likely happened is that during Jesus' life, he wasn't walking around claiming to be the Messiah, but rather that was a claim made for him. It was only after his death that people at some point started to think he was the Messiah, and people started to think that he rose from the dead. It's possible that Mary Magdalene was responsible for that. After all, she was probably a woman who struggled with mental health. That's why she's identified in the book of Luke, chapter 8, as someone who was possessed by demons, and Jesus cast it out of her, that perhaps she came up with that. In that there was a division in the church and the Jerusalem church, that we can be absolutely sure of, that in the early church, there was enormous division between Paul and the Jerusalem church, because there'd be no reason in the world for Paul to be writing about his division, his differences between him and James, and for him to be attacking those who had a false gospel, who had penetrated the communities in Asia Minor with a different gospel. And Paul therefore says to the Galatians, who bewitched you, you foolish Galatians? Well, why would he make that up? So there's no doubt that the early church was very, very similar to the early movement of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormons. It was very, very similar. And Paul was very, very much a Joseph Smith character. Paul was not a good faith actor. Rather, he invented this in order to gain popularity. You know, when Paul's running around going, I'm not a liar, I'm not a liar, I'm not lying, well, there's a reason why he's saying that. So Jesus certainly never claimed to be God. And that's why we only find this kind of high Christology where Jesus kind of saying things that sound like he's God. Like, for instance, in John 8:58 as an example, before Abraham was, I am. That's very, very late. You would not expect to find anything resembling that in Paul's letters and the first 3 Gospels. And as it turns out, you won't. That's a very high Christology. He's still not claiming to be equal with God or to be a person or triune Godhead, but it's certainly flirting with it because it's very, very late stuff. The prologue of John, which means the first 18 passages of the book of the 4th Gospel, you have a high Christology. In the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God, and the Word was a God. It doesn't have the ho theos, but a God. So we have a fairly high Christology, and the Word became flesh and dwelt among us, John 1, verse 14, a central feature of the prologue. So I think that in the earliest stages of the Christian world, now, Jesus didn't write anything, right? So it's very, very difficult to say with certainty what occurred there. But all the information that we can gather, it seems that Jesus certainly didn't claim to be God, and he could have been an itinerant fellow from the northern Galilee who later on people came to think was the Messiah. And that's why you would have these puzzling texts in Matthew chapter 16. It's a very famous chapter. It's the chapter upon which the Roman Catholic Church depends to prove the papacy and that Peter was the rock on which the church is built. It's a very important chapter. And in Mark 16, is portrayed as occurring right before Jesus' crucifixion. This is really at the end of his ministry. And we're told there, Jesus asks everyone that's been hanging around him, "Who do you say that I am?" And this is in the Christian Bible. This is not later legend. This is not stuff coming from the Acts of Peter, the Acts of Paul. This is in the Gospels. Who do you think I am? Right? And it turns out the people who are with him, all of his career, have no clue. Well, why? If he's running around saying I'm the Messiah, why would they be clueless? Now, the New Testament's admitting this. And the criteria of embarrassment definitely comes into play here. Now, Peter says you are the Christ, you're the Son of the living God. And what is Jesus' response? What is his reply? How does he react to this? Jesus reacts by saying that flesh and blood did not reveal this to you. That's really important. I mean, what do you mean flesh and blood? I thought Jesus was running around saying, I'm the Messiah. I thought his disciples were running around saying, I am Messiah. No, they weren't. Hence, Matthew chapter 16, verse 20, a passage we referred to earlier. So why would Jesus be saying to Peter that flesh and blood that means no human being, nothing earthly could have revealed this to you? Well, the reason is this is an apologetic that's built into the storyline so that at some point when the story is being massaged and fashioned, they have to address the question of why didn't this guy have a claim to be the Messiah? We heard that he never claimed to be the Messiah. It was a huge secret. And you could sniff. So, no, I don't believe for a moment that Jesus ever claimed to be the Messiah, but rather that claim was made for him later. If you would have been around in the year 30, you would not have met anybody like with the name Jesus or Yeshua claiming to be the Messiah. That was a later Christian invention that was then interpolated into later books like the letters of Paul and the Gospels that are written in the second half of the first century. If you enjoyed this program, please like and subscribe.